Hello, I'm live. Good afternoon. It is Sunday afternoon and it is a bit lost in the days. It's the 6th of January 2022. The reason why I'm getting a little bit confused sometimes is because this story Lydia plays in 2012 and I've had the occasional little error there. Apologize. Lydia is a book about reincarnations, and it is a follow-on from the first book, Bliss After Life, where Bliss, who is 95, passes over into the afterlife, and we're following her, and we're following her family and the various groups involved with her. It's a story I started spinning in 2006, and the book 1 was finished in 2017. And then I continued writing on Lydia, who is born at the beginning of Lydia. She was born on the 9th of March 2012. And we are now well into the year. We're in autumn 2012, and there has been a gathering because Melanie channels and group consciousness called Mio, had instructed them with a few points on a list. And one of the points was to watch the movie They Live. So we are here on the movie night, and they've watched the movie, they have gathered and sit together, and we are now at chapter 54, which is entitled Mio Speaks. It has been wonderful to see your engagement in the list. We are delighted about the way you got into the spirit of it. Melanie was smiling, looking up from the flames to the group around the fire. We are so pleased all of you are actually here, and we have been observing all of this with delight. It is easier for us to be of a little assistance if you enter into the spirit of it. This is meant literally. Melanie was smiling. It was a goosebump moment, and Lydia was gurgling. Frida gave a short bark, and everybody had to laugh because it was almost surreal here in the dark around the fire, with all of them having watched a film together, and an endless string of conversations centering about the various points, most of which were questions, the answers to them still largely unfathomed. We feel you have made great progress. Melanie looked at David and then at Peter and then at Tony, and went around the whole group, connecting with their gaze. Chris was holding his breath again and felt Melanie smiling at him. He released it and smiled back. For Faye, Anna and also Melanie, the subject matters feel largely dark. They have little star children to grow, and we feel there should be no expectation of particular subject matters from anybody. Melanie has enough to deal with knowing the details, but she is deeply aware of the wider picture, as you know, to some extent. And we feel it is best if you continue to talk amongst each other and fill missing pieces of this puzzle over time. David and Peter, you are correct. The history of this planet is distorted and inverted. We confirm this because it will take some research to get closer to the truth. Regarding alien visitations, you know there have been explorers like Erich van Däniken, who you have heard of him, Silvana and Tony. Have a look at what they found many decades ago. Do not let it overwhelm you. We assure you that there is time. It will be almost a decade until the real change is felt on this planet, but the preparation for it has been long already. David, Tony and Susan have all now read the recommended book, The Only Planet of Choice, and that will give you an idea of the timescale we are experiencing now. Studying this material, or even just looking at it with questioning eyes, will prepare you for the times to come. Please do not forget to live your life. Look at it as a preparation, an exercise in critical thinking. You are all in a good place emotionally at this time of 2012, and we will have lovely events in 2013. There will be a new life, more than one in this family, and all we ask of you is that you continue to keep contact. discuss all matters, and if there is an urgency for a question, please contact Melanie. We are here to help, but not to intervene or interfere. Holly, like Primo and his kind. Melanie was smiling and suddenly came back to herself. Still smiling, she looked at Holly, laughing by now. How has it been going with your book? You have not mentioned it for ages. It has not been going. Holly frowned. Ever since we got the list, I have been fretting, and not had the mood to write at all. It has been weeks that she had sat down. She was thinking, when was it, the last time? I think that's all right, don't you, Melanie? Chris looked at Holly. He had been quite happy that she was not at her laptop most of the time. He had reduced his hours at the refuge, and they'd had a nice summer. Melanie met his eyes. Yes, Chris, Holly, you know that it is best to write when you feel like it. I think it was just a reminder. You have already written so much. It seems to me that Mio is trying to convey that. And what he's trying to say is that it is a slow progress and a slow process. And they seem to want us just prepared for whatever it is. We have to trust that it will reveal itself to us. Melanie had got up to stretch. She felt she could do with some music. It was always a little tense when Mio came, as everyone was listening so attentively to her. Today she remembered everything that was said. She knew that Mio wanted her to hear it. The pregnancy did make her feel reluctant to focus on the list, and she was glad that this was okay, and that there was time. She had given up her job at the cafe and had been working at making their 2 flats suitable as one larger accommodation. It was a good thing that Pete was an architect. It turned out there was quite a bit of work to be done to make it suitable, but it was starting to look great, and she was going to move into the refuge for the next few weeks, whilst the heavy work was going on. She was really glad about this, as it gave her a chance to be with Lydia and Anna, but her communication with Lydia had been riveting. She loved being at the refuge, and she had again moved into the loft sanctuary. It was Melanie's favourite place, and she had brought a car full of stuff coming here, as she was not going back for a few weeks. Tony was going to commute for long weekends to her, but he was involved in the building work, and Peter drove up and down between his work at Evelyn's house in London and Melanie's. Pete owned the flat that Tony lived in, and it was in his own interest to make the most of it. Susan's loft sanctuary had inspired all of them. Melanie was thrilled with the blueprint of the flat, and Pete was amazed how large it was going to be. They had also extended into the loft, combining the 2 flats. It was going to be a very quirky and interesting place. Tony had completely got into the swing of it. His plans had changed the moment Melanie announced Milton. He had always been quite handy, staying with Ben at Steve's. They had often done woodwork. He had enjoyed putting up shelves and little things like that. Working with Pete had been fantastic. He was amazing at building stuff, and their conversations, whilst they were working, with a little music in the background, had become one of the favourite things to do for him. Pete was in his element, and they had tried to keep Melanie's flat as the last major work. They had been talking building work non-stop, and Melanie was looking forward to staying here in the refuge. They will probably never stop calling it that. Everyone started to move about, and conversation had started. Silvana was telling Steve that Mia was correct. Her own father had shown her a book with drawings in caves, and the author had been this Erich van Däniken. Tony joined them. My only Bliss once showed me a book of his in the library. It's funny, but I remember it clearly. We laughed about the elongated heads of the Egyptian-looking drawings. How come she mentioned you, Silvana? She liked Tony. My father, he showed me a book of his, and like you, I never forgot it, although I cannot remember many details, and shall have a look at it on the internet. Me too, Tony was laughing. Shall I get you both a drink? Yes, please, thank you. Melanie was standing with Anna and Faye. Lydia had fallen asleep in the garden house, and they were talking about their feelings for the list. Gosh, Melanie, I'm quite glad that I do not know the insides and outsides of all these points. Somehow there is a darkness in a number of them, and I'm glad that Mio is getting that. But you still know, right? Anna was nodding. She had similar thoughts. Being pregnant, too, she had decided to read The Only Planet of Choice next. David had assured her that it was really good, and many questions about the why the pictures are treated with a measured approach. It did concern quite a few of the points on the list, he said, but this had to be discovered. He had a way of making it sound fun. He had been much at the house recently, and they often sat in the kitchen with Susan and Faye and Ben talking about their cultures. David said that this book would give her a wider perspective, with a view to the beginning of it all. She was intrigued and was glad to have it in her bedroom. Pete had been much at the coast, working in earnest at the conversion, and she had time to read. It was nice that the refuge was like a home now. They had had a string of visitors and had been a great summer all round. Much time had been spent in the garden, and this early October evening seemed a perfect ending to a lovely summer. Ben was looking for Tony and his guitar. He knew Tony wanted to try out the tuning his mum had been talking about. He found him talking to David about the very same subject, and they went off to get their guitars, waving at Steve. They were going to occupy the inside-outside space. Faye decided to take little Lydia into the house. She fancied a cup of tea, and Melanie and Anna walked with her back into the kitchen. It was nice and warm inside. She had started to get chilly. It was almost midnight. Chris had gone into the house to clear the parlour and put all the chairs back into the various rooms. He had enjoyed the evening, but he was glad for a little peace and quiet, getting on with sorting things out. Putting one foot in front of the other, he was thinking, because much of the list was still totally puzzling him. The movie had been great. He'd enjoyed it. The era was the 80s, and he remembered those years. But he would have been oblivious to aliens. That never entered his mind. He had enjoyed the movie like most things in movies, a play, usually some manipulation for the audience. Movies were not his thing. He preferred reading. He was not sure when he was going to read The Only Planet of Choice. It was making the rounds, and he was happy to wait until Anna was finished with it. Holly had suggested they buy a copy, but a look on the internet showed him that it was quite expensive, and he was happy to wait. This was a wonderful room, he thought. He had closed the French doors. They could come into the kitchen. It was getting really cold, and he felt like making a cup of tea for himself and go upstairs. He liked the room they occupied. It was great to have such a choice. He met Holly in the hall. She was telling him that the boys were playing their guitars in the summer house, all having tuned to 432 hearts, and she was not going to bed yet. They were working on Time in a Bottle, and she wasn't going to miss that. She herself, Holly, had looked more into the beneficial frequencies. There were many, and she had enjoyed listening to many different ones on YouTube in the last few weeks. She had not felt like writing, and she and Chris had had some lovely time away. She knew that next year was going to be very different. Little Milton was due around the 20th of December, and the time until March, when Anna's little Joseph was due, would race by. And then there was Lydia's first birthday. At least we know for sure that that is the 9th of March. Holly went back outside and joined the music makers. Tony, Steve and David all had guitars. Ben had gone to Susan's house and picked up David's, and Steve always had one in his boot. They were sitting in the summer house and were already playing If I Could Save Time in a Bottle. Holly sat herself next to Melanie. Susan and Anna sat at the other end. The fire had started to die and it was getting chilly, but none of them felt like going in. Silvana had made herself a cup of tea and took a chair closer to the gentle embers, which would soon die. It was a lovely atmosphere, and she was so happy to have met Steve and be with him, and with that, the whole family. Do you think this feels particularly lovely because you all changed the tuning? Holly was curious because she really enjoyed listening, and they had all been humming along. I don't really know, Mum, to be honest. What do you think, Steve? You're the most experienced musician here, I believe. Yes, my musical career has taken off much more than I expected. Thinking about it, maybe it has something to do with it. He was laughing and frowning at the same time. Your guitar was already tuned to 432 hearts. It made it all quite easy. Is that what you mean, Steve? To be honest, I had not thought about it deeply, but yes, it has been tuned like this for years. After I finished my furniture business, I went traveling a bit for inspiration. I met a sitar player who was quite specific with his tuning. I had a lot of fun. It changed the way that I played. The music I wrote after that trip was better than anything I'd ever done before. When I came back, I got together with people who tuned naturally, and it had not really occurred to me to investigate the whole thing. He was surprised himself that he had not questioned the change. Once he had tuned his guitar along with the others in India, he never changed it, and all his music had developed along with it. Steve suddenly felt very tired. He looked at Silvana, who nodded, smiling. She was ready to go to their room and got up. Steve packed his guitar. "Sorry guys, I'm suddenly really tired. This has been an amazing and surprising evening all round." "Yes, to be honest, my head is spinning a little too." Holly got up and put her hand out to pull Susan out of the garden chair. They were laughing. "Chris is already upstairs. He cleared the parlour and I shall go straight up. I'm sure his head was bursting. All these questions have seriously unsettled him." Melanie was helping Tony to pack things away. Mio said that we should not fret about it. I know that sounds a bit lame in view of the things we talked about, aliens and frequencies. We haven't even touched on the dimensions. We are in the third, by the way, fourth spirit plane and fifth ascension plane. She looked around. "You are not helping, Melanie." Susan was laughing. They were clearing the chairs away and David put sand on the fire, which had almost gone out already. He switched off the lights in the outside-inside place and locked the doors. All were walking back to the house. Evelyn and Mark had sneaked away a while ago. The dogs were still chasing each other in the dim light and were called in. The movie night had come to an end. This was the end of chapter 54. I hope you have a lovely Sunday. Bye-bye.